Welcome into Palolo Points. I am Brandon Strange of Sports Map Houston. He is Charlie Palolo of ESPN Houston. Charlie, welcome in. Remember, everybody, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Charlie, I want to talk to you about Christian Wood with the Rockets. We have a small but growing sample size of Christian Wood, and I got to say, it's pretty exciting to see a skilled big man back in a Rockets uniform, taking nothing away from Boogie, but man, it's really interesting to see this young, athletic player, this big, really coming into his own on this Rockets team. It's kind of a stark comparison. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Kind of compare what you're seeing out of Christian Wood to what the Rockets have had in the past with Capella and then subsequently Robert Covington.
Yeah, look, you use the word skill. He has a pretty broad base of skills that's impressive. Now, I don't want him to lose speed and quickness. So if he could maintain what he has while going on a little bit of a mashed potatoes and milkshake diet, against Denver, he had 3 rebounds in 37 minutes as Nikola Jokic pretty much tore him up. But he's very fluid looking, shooting the 3. He has grace catching the ball on the move out of pick and roll situations. So the ability to pick and pop obviously is in stark contrast to what Clint Capella could do. He was strictly a roll man, catch the balls thrown up above the rim. So Wood's off to a pretty impressive start overall, and for whatever Sturm and Drang and drama ongoing or to play out with Harden, 3 years, $41.5 million. Very early on. Looks like a very solid investment by Rafael Stone and the new regime.
Well, let's talk about the new regime, because the guy who brought in Christian Wood, who was tasked with remaking a roster without really any cap room to speak of and, being weighed down by 2 really big contracts, was Rafael Stone. And he was able to, it was so important to be able to, number one, offload the Russell Westbrook contract. That was so challenging. And it was a big question of whether, who won that trade or who would win that trade. Early on, the results seemed to favor the Rockets. And then, to bring in a guy like Christian Wood on such a team-friendly contract, he took a chance for sure, but it looks like he, won that transaction as well. We'll have to see on both of those things, but talk about, your impressions of Rafael Stone and kind of what you've seen early on and the kind of transition he's been able to make to this roster. Like I said, he was very challenged given the situation. Are you impressed with what you've seen so far?
There's nothing that should be making any Rockets fan or critic say, oh no, or see what they have in this guy. It's still very early and naked eye versus analytics to be determined, but John Wall has looked good. I think DeMarcus Cousins is strictly a role player. Well, he signed for the minimum, so there need be no expectations of much beyond that. Wall for the here and now obviously is pivotal. But with Harden, or if the Rockets are moving sooner or later or whenever into the post-Harden, you need some younger pieces to start growing with. Christian Wood's 25 years old, right? Wall is 30. Cousins is in his 30s. Daniel House is nothing more than a niche player, and he's 27 years old. So I'm not forecasting superstardom for Christian Wood, but a really notably above average starter for someone to be, if not the fulcrum of the next really good Rockets team, at least a guy that you're thinking, you know what, he can be the second or third best player the next time my team can be really good. It's a thumbs up on Christian Wood bringing the lumber so far.
The elephant in the room is James Harden, and you touched on that. We don't know what's going to happen with that. Obviously, it appears that he will eventually be traded. We've seen what Christian Wood looks like with Harden in a small sample size, and an even smaller sample size. We've seen what Wood looks like without Harden on the court. So I guess, my question to you is, what do you think the difference between his development will be? Is losing Harden going to lower the ceiling a little bit of where Christian Wood can be, or do you think the Rockets can continue to develop him, having a guy like John Wall by his side?
Yeah, engage James Harden, it would be lower water, lowering all boats. Wood is a terrific pick and roll partner because he can do the flip side with the pick and pop and shoot the ball, which opens up options for both Harden and Wood. Wall is quick and you can put him in the pick and roll, but he's just not the shooting element from the outside and the brute force finisher that Harden is. So it's a net loss for Christian Wood and every other Rocket if you move on from James Harden. And we are in the snapshot phase as opposed to a mural. Right, Philadelphia is 5-1. Does this mean, well, they'll never have interest in trading for James Harden? Now they're great. Let's check back a month or two from now. The Cleveland Cavaliers are 4-2. So how will that Harden market play out? The Brooklyn Nets aren't dominating the world. Could they get to where they sweeten an offer with draft picks and players to where the Rockets' interest might be piqued? What other teams could emerge as players where you're thinking a feasible match or get into a three-way? But whatever the return is for the Rockets, if they trade for Harden, they're going to lose the trade in the near term because if you're getting 2 or 3 rotation players, that does not compensate for one superstar. And if you get a draft pick haul, those are all future returns as opposed to present returns. And then it's what do you hit on, what do you miss on with those draft picks. So the Rockets being off to a non-catastrophic start, does that smooth the waters out with Harden enough to, well, I'm good to at least the All-Star break of playing the first half of the schedule and then reevaluating? I think there's cause for some hope, though I think the longer play bet probably is the Rockets look to move on from Harden, but they're not going to be compelled to trade him for 30 cents on the dollar. You know you're not going to get a dollar for a dollar, but you don't want to get totally ripped off.
What does the arrival of Christian Wood as a player, and again, we're talking very prematurely here, but if he continues on the trajectory he's on and he becomes a pivotal part of the Rockets offense, what does his arrival and his development mean for a Harden trade? Because does that, open things up to where, you've got a certain piece locked down, you've got a piece locked in, or does that narrow the search a little bit because there are certain players that may be out of play now?
Yeah, I guess that can be caught a little bit in the middle, that if Wood is 25 and you trade Harden and you're getting a couple of assets, so you're thinking who could grow into their primes with Christian Wood. Well, on the other hand, John Wall has this year and 2 more. He's already 30. And the Rockets are not a franchise that wants to be patient and let the stew simmer. And 3-4 years from now, he can be a real contender again. So they're trying to thread the needle on those 2 objectives. But if Christian Wood has staying power as a legit 22 and 11 guy, shooting a solid percentage from the floor and even middling 3-point shooting that has to be accounted for out there as opposed to the Capella type centers. Does it widen the spectrum where they're thinking if he can really be our second best player, right? You're not going to get a superstar back for James Harden. No team's going to trade a superstar to get James Harden. But if you're getting complementary plus pieces, the Western Conference is still a bear. If you're going to take down LeBron and Anthony Davis, if you're going to beat Kawhi and Paul George, who knows if you're going to beat Chris Paul and Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, you're going to need another clear star-level player to go with Wood and Wall if they're still going to be stars, because neither guy projects as a superstar. So I think you better have at least 3 stars to try to beat 2 superstars if you're sticking with my math here. I think in the end, the Rockets are in a phase where unless it miraculously all smooths out with Harden, they're not going to be a top-tier contender for at least the next couple of years until the Lakers specifically slip, and we'll see what happens with Kawhi after this season with the Clippers.